The year is 1094. The mercenary known as El Cid is at the gates of Valencia. After a siege of 20 months, he enters the city, captures the chief judge and his family, and had them burned at the stake. This harrowing scene is brought to us by Muhammad ibn Khalaf al-Sadfi in his book called Al-Bayan al-Wadih fil Manam al-Fadih. He lived and was a witness to these trying times. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind a bit. In 1090, Al-Mutawakkil ibn Atas was still at the head of the Taifa of Badajoz. He was known for his deep love for evenings of poetry and wine. But he also was a brave warrior. After all, he had participated in the Battle of Sakrajas along with Yusuf ibn Tashfin and Al-Mu'tamid ibn Abad of Sevilla. But as the Qadr of Allah would have it, a time came when Al-Mutawakkil had to make a choice. He was to surrender the state to the Murabitun or try to work it out with the Christians and stay in power. He remained undecided and played the role of a double agent for some time, dealing with Alfonso VI on one side, while at the same time playing nice with Sayyid ibn Abu Bakr, the Almoravid general appointed over Al-Andalus. Eventually, on advice from his son, Al-Mutawakkil decides not to vacate his seat in favor of the Morabitun. This decision did not sit well with the people of Badajoz, who rallied against him due to the dangerous steps he took giving up nearby cities to Alfonso VI. Sayyid ibn Abi Bakr understood that it was necessary to answer the people's will of securing the city before the forces of Alonso arrived. He quickly sped up preparations for the takeover of Badajoz, in which Al-Mutawakkil barricaded himself, preparing to defend against the siege and hoping for the arrival of the Christians. Sayyid ibn Abi Bakr had done the necessary preparations and accumulated massive forces, but diplomacy prevailed, and he convinced the guards of the city walls to avoid shedding unnecessary blood. After finding an agreement, the gates of the city were opened by night. Al-Mutawakkil and his sons Al-Fadl and Al-Abbas were caught early in 1090. But unlike Al-Mu'tamid of Sevilla, Al-Mutawakkil was given the death sentence for high treason. His son Al-Mansur, the same one who had advised him not to give up power to the Almoravids, fled to the Christians for protection. The Almoravids continued their struggle until they got back all the cities given up by Al-Mutawakkil in the west of Al-Andalus. They then turned their attention east and reached the surroundings of Valencia, where the Munafiq Al-Qadir, who had surrendered Toledo to Alfonso VI, was working with the famous El Cid. El Cid, from his real name Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, was given the nickname as Sayyid, which is Arabic for Lord. It was given by his Muslim allies on account of his many military prowesses. He was a mercenary who worked for anyone who could pay him, be it Muslims or Christians alike. For example, in 1079, he aided Al-Mu'tamid of Sevilla in his battle against the Taifa of Granada. However, for his disobedience against the orders of Alfonso VI, he was exiled and found refuge in the court of Al-Muqtadir in Zaragoza, where he was warmly received and trusted to defend the city. At the death of Al-Muqtadir, the Taifa of Zaragoza was divided between his two sons, Al-Mu'taman and Al-Mundir. El Cid stayed in the service of Zaragoza, defending Al-Mu'taman against his own brother, who himself had allied the Count of Barcelona. When Al-Mu'taman was succeeded by his son Al-Mustain, Al-Qadir, who was at the head of Valencia, asked for Al-Mustain's help against Al-Mundir. In 1088, Rodrigo and Al-Mustain went to Valencia with the help of Alfonso VI. But El Cid, a fine strategist, managed to play both emirs. He seized Valencia and kept Al-Qadir as a puppet leader. And this was how low the Taifas had fallen, using the services of a Christian mercenary who took money from all sides and turned his back on both. By now, the Almoravids had shifted their focus and forces to the east. Sayyid ibn Abi Bakr was in charge of operations, guided by Yusuf ibn Tashfin's men who remained at the time in Ceuta. The people of Valencia had had enough of the puppet Al-Qadir and wanted to get rid of him. The chief judge of the city, Ja'far ibn Jahaf, had made a clear and unilateral statement to revolt and had asked one of Ibn Tashfin's men, Ibn Ha'isha, for support against El Cid. A small detachment of 500 men was sent to Valencia, and a siege was laid out. Al-Qadir tried to flee and save himself, but he got caught by the locals and put immediately to death for the numerous accounts of high treason he was responsible for, both in Toledo and Valencia. The Almoravids triumphantly entered the city and re-established Islamic rulings, removing unlawful taxes on the population. The justice they brought made them loved by the locals. They were seen as liberators, and for good reasons, as we just mentioned. And this was a significant blow for El Cid, who used to get a yearly tribute of 100,000 dinars from Al-Qadir. In 1094, however, once the Morabitine left the city, the cunning El Cid set up a siege. The siege was tight, nothing went in or out, and it lasted 20 months. Hunger started to settle in, and people starved to death. El Cid even burned the few locals that tried to escape alive to ensure that no one else even dares to try it again. Muhammad ibn Khalaf al-Sadfi wrote the history of Valencia in a book called Al-Bayan al-Wadih fil Manan al-Fadih. He mentions the basic food price hikes due to the siege. He describes harrowing scenes of desolation, people eating cats and rats, even corpses sometimes. The situation reached an impossibly harsh reality. Eventually, the chief judge had to surrender the city. They opened the gates after taking covenant with the Cid to ensure their safety. But taking covenant with a mercenary has more often than not proven to be a bad idea, and as expected, El Cid blatantly ignored the covenant and went against his word. He captured the chief judge and his family, took their money, and had them burnt at the stake. Now, just think of this. El Cid, which, let's be clear, was a lawless mercenary, is still today considered a hero among Christians, specifically in Spain. Now, what do you think of this character? Is he a glorified murderer or a Reconquista hero? Let me know in the comment section down below. At this point, the people of Valencia were at the mercy of El Cid. Any form of revolt was harshly suppressed. El Cid gathered the Muslims in the palace and demanded from them 7,000 mithqabs, threatening to kill them all if his demand was not met. Meanwhile, Yusuf ibn Tashfin was not indifferent to the events unfolding in Valencia. He dispatched his forces and sent a first army led by Abu Bakr ibn Ibrahim. However, due to unfavorable weather conditions, the first offensive was unsuccessful. Christian sources mention that the Almoravids were located between two rivers, which got rapidly overflown with rains, which then basically made it easy for the forces of El Cid to pounce on them. The second charge was led by Muhammad ibn Tashfin, but he fell ill and could not hold on to the lead. El Cid then took advantage of the distraction caused and attacked, driving the Almoravids into a full retreat. From there on, Muhammad ibn Tashfin moved back to Morocco and left Ali ibn al-Hajj in charge. At this point, Yusuf ibn Tashfin was greatly aggravated and worried by the events in Valencia, as these two consecutive defeats seem to have shaken the confidence of the Morabitun. In 1096, he sent reinforcements to Al-Andalus to keep the stranglehold on Valencia. These forces met Alfonso's army in Cantuegra, southeast of Toledo. In open fields, the Almoravids were the most feared opponents. They made easy work of Alfonso's forces, killing Diego, El Cid's only heir, who was fighting in Alfonso's army. This crushing victory at Cantuegra lifted the Muslims' morale after the hardships in Valencia. Eventually, in 1099, El Cid passes away. Christian sources mention that the grief of losing his only heir accelerated his demise. Before dying, however, he married his daughter to the Count of Barcelona, leaving powerful alliances that would guarantee security to Valencia. Or so he thought. That same year, Yusuf ibn Tashfin put his grandson, Yahya ibn Abu Bakr ibn Yusuf, in charge of the siege of Toledo, supported by both Sir ibn Abu Bakr and Muhammad ibn al-Hajj. The goal was to isolate Valencia by cutting off all possible routes from Toledo. They waited outside the city, wanting to meet Alfonso's forces in open field once again. But Alfonso at this point had been administered enough defeats at their hands to know it would be yet another disaster. He barricaded himself in his fort instead, knowing that the Almoravids' one weakness was their lack of experience with siege weapons. After they secured all surroundings of Toledo, the situation turned into a stalemate, and so they decided to turn their attention to Valencia. All of this was happening while the Crusades in the east were in full swing in 1099. The very same year Jerusalem fell to the Christians, and Yusuf was well aware of the events. He increased his pressure on Al-Andalus. The siege of Valencia was laid out as part of those war efforts against the Crusaders. It lasted 7 months and was laid out around Cullera, on the upper bank of the river by one of the Almoravids senior, Muhammad ibn Salah Khan. Meanwhile, the Christians in Valencia had sent out emissaries to Alfonso, calling him for help against the Muslims, which Alfonso responded to. A large battle took place on the river of the bank at Cullera, which ultimately resulted in the Muslims capturing Valencia in 1101. The city would remain in the hands of the Muslims for another 8 years. The door was now open to the Muslims to continue pushing further north. In 1103, the Almoravids raided Barcelona and the castles around it, under the lead of the Emir Ibn Salah Khan. And so did the Almoravids succeed in taking over the eastern part of Al-Andalus from both the Christians and the Taifa kings themselves. Only one city-state remained, Saragossa, which was led by the Banu Hud, some of whom we mentioned earlier in the video. It seems their full cooperation with the Morabitun during this decade-long war got them to be recognized as an independent city-state and did not necessitate outing Emir al-Hussein. The exchanges between the two parties were cordial, mutually understanding, and agreeable on the matters at hand. As a result, peace and prosperity prevailed in Saragossa for as long as Emir Yusuf ibn Tashfin lived. The story of Sayyid is but one chapter in the rich tapestry of Al-Andalus history, filled with intrigue and betrayal. From the Muslim perspective, however, the story of Sayyid would remain undeniably that of a lawless mercenary, whose only allegiance was to money. We will pursue our work on the Morabitun with the fourth and final crossing to Iberia by Yusuf ibn Tashfin.
If you enjoyed the video, there's more for you here and here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.